What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 8 of the Past Your Prime podcast. Today, we're going to talk about exercise progression. Before we jump into that, let's go into injury updates with Alex and Craig.
I'm not sure why. I just did a thumb up, but I like that we didn't even go into I'm Craig.
Yeah, we just got rid of the end.
Thank God. Whew.
Go watch a previous episode if you want.
It is embarrassing, but do we have any new patient problem pathologies?
You do.
Yes.
I don't have any new ones. I've got old ones.
My neck issue that I described 3 or 4 episodes ago came back and is raging.
Yeah, you're like stiff-necked when I saw you this morning.
I can barely move. I mean, that hurts quite a bit. You can feel it from here all the way.
You want me to do some traction? Pull on your head a little bit?
It helps a lot. Sarah did a whole bunch of work on my neck, and it felt amazing.
She is a genie when it comes to those things.
She is a genie. She has amazing hands, and felt much better afterwards.
Nice.
How is your wrist?
My body feels pretty darn good. I'd say my TFL is upper 90%, but my wrist actually feels a lot better than it did 2 weeks ago. So I came in for PT again this week, been taking it easy, and we'll talk about it a little bit today in today's episode just with exercise progression. But in the gym, I'm able to do almost everything that I want to be able to do, pain-free.
Perfect.
Yeah, still limited on some range of motion stuff, but aside from that, it's feeling...
Can you show the audience what you can do now?
I can bend it both ways, just not very far.
Look at that. That's so amazing. And that's just a kidney bone.
Right. Just a little kidney bean shaped bone in my wrist.
A little kidney bean shaped bone in the wrist.
Limiting all my activity.
Oh, that was a depressed sigh.
I'm still a little bit depressed about this, but that's all right. Yeah. Still hitting hard in the gym, and we'll argue about this a little bit in terms of which standard I'm in. But
right before we started, we actually just got into a pretty vigorous debate on where he's at in his training.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable.
And hopefully you guys will get to see some of that here pretty soon. But I guess we'll do a quick intro. I'm Alex. This is Craig. Craig's a physical therapist. I at one point was a professional volleyball player, hoping to get back there again. Just, woe is me. My poor wrist is broken. I can't play volleyball.
You will get back to it.
Yeah.
I am Craig, and I have the inability to introduce myself without sounding like a moron. So I think we're good on the intro.
Very good.
Nice.
So today's topic, how do you progress in exercise? What is exercise progression to you?
This is where we got into an argument. So for me, exercise progression depends on the problem being addressed. We talked about this basically in every episode. There's 5 problems that when you come into either a rehab clinic or you're doing something physically active that you're really going to want to work on. 1's making sure you have the right diagnosis and you know what it is. 2 is that you're able to manage on a day-to-day basis by yourself. We're not going to get into that today. We're going to assume that you're past those two problems. That leads you into what I think are the 3 standards that then tell you what you need to be working on. First one's rehab standard. Second one's exercise or maintenance standard. And the third one is performance standard. And those problems are your tissue capacity is lower than what your exercise capacity is. That indicates the rehab standard. Exercise standard is that you keep either falling off your workouts or you don't know how to do the basic functional activities and you don't have your basic variables of speed, coordination, endurance, and I always mess it up. Strength, speed, endurance, and coordination.
Coordination. There you go.
So you hit those 4. If there's a detriment or you're missing any of those, then you can't even get to the last one, which is the one that's talked about the most that we just got into an argument about, which is the performance standard, where you're trying to maximize a specific variable to maximize your overall performance in whatever activity it is.
Drop a comment below and let Craig know that I'm in the performance standard.
So Alex is quite clearly in the rehab standard,
which is the lowest.
Which is the lowest. It is the lowest standard. When I said that, when we were talking over the plan for today, you didn't agree.
No. So I agree a little bit just because, okay, my wrist is limiting me. I can't do the activity I want to do, which is play volleyball, but I can do almost everything else. I can't power clean. I can't do a front squat with normal form. I can do the kind of cross arms over the bar, which I haven't done in a couple of weeks. And I can't do like a standard push-up, but I can do a military push-up. So I can do a lot of the things that I want, and I feel like I'm still able to push my performance, just not necessarily on the volleyball court. Why do you disagree so adamantly?
Your main problem, the top problem that you have,
My problem pathology.
your top patient problem pathology, we love alliteration here at PYP. That's what drives the decision on how your programming is based. So what is the biggest problem for you is that your kidney bean shaped bone in your wrist cannot handle basic activity, basic tissue loading when you do your sport or when you do specific exercises, which means that is the top of the list of what has to be absolutely managed when you're thinking through exercise progression and activity. Because if we just go right to performance standard, you're going to have what happened 2 weeks ago where you blew your wrist up. And I mean, you lost 2 weeks of being able to do activity with your wrist, where we had to basically
Not in the gym,
it.
though. Not in the gym.
Not in the gym. And I'm not saying when we talk about this, I'm not saying that you can't do exercise and that you can't also work out everywhere else. But what takes precedent is the thing that's going to be the biggest limiter on your body, which is your wrist.
I still don't want to believe it.
I can tell. Yeah. So, it is so easy to ignore. And where I find the biggest issue with this is that individuals will build these compensations in. So we take your scenario. He could basically ignore that wrist, work around it, tape it, do all sorts of horrible things with Tiger Balm all over his body. He could do that. That would be a mistake, in my opinion, because if we do this really well, if we push his tissue capacity up to where it equals his exercise capacity, you're not going to be limited in the gym. You're not going to be limited in volleyball. You're not going to lose 2 to 3 weeks of training.
I need to be a better trainee. I went
better
did super hard yesterday, and it was not one of the workouts on my plan. We didn't talk about this.
Okay, that's awesome.
But yeah, I need harder workouts, and I put myself through it, but it's not necessarily your direction. So apologies in advance.
No apologies needed. So let's actually dive into the rehab standard, because what you're describing is actually a common problem where we don't create a good enough program. Like, so your program, even though you're on the rehab standard, still needs to give you the things that make it so that you don't do
I need stimulant.
stupid stuff outside of it.
I'm stupid.
Well, we're here to cure stupidity. So let's do it.
Alrighty. Why do you need to know which standard you're in? Which I'm clearly not in the rehab standard, except for my little wrist problem.
A little less rough. The biggest issue is that if you don't understand you're in the rehab standard, you will constantly overcome your tissue capacity and you will be in this permanent injury loop hell. People who come in where they have recurrent low back pain, they have recurrent neck pain, they have recurrent wrist pain, recurrent anything where it's the exact same injury that seems to happen on a 2 to 3 month basis because you never actually build up the tissue capacity. It sets you back because the threshold is so low that the only time you're not going to pass it is when you're actively trying to compensate around it. When that compensation goes, you're back to where you were when you started.
I will say I thought about, like, is there a way that you can tape my wrist a lot more so that it doesn't go back so that I can play volleyball? And then I was like, I won't even ask him that. I just did, but...
You're like a crack addict. I love it.
Yeah.
You just need
I'm
that
a tweaker over here.
That's funny. So, man, it is rough. I would actually say that's the hardest part, but it is the number one issue. When we think about progression with exercise, those three matter. And so for example, like if you're not in the rehab standard, say we get to the exercise standard, the other part, we'll have individuals who come in and they really want to be doing sport-specific training. If you don't have a base level of strength, endurance, speed, and coordination, you can't even do the exercises that are needed to get the maximal performance variables even targeted, like strength, endurance. You can't even do anything around that because you're not strong enough to actually produce the load at a high enough level for a long enough time to hit those variables. And it is such a huge issue, but it's very clear that you're in the rehab standard. And so you build the whole workout routine. You build the workout routine so it addresses the biggest problem. And then other things where you're not having that problem, we can still progress and we can still hit the load, but it's different. There's a different mindset.
I'm in the rehab standard for volleyball.
You're in the rehab standard, period.
I feel like we got to leave it slightly.
No. If you stay very clear on what the biggest issue is, you'll be much more successful in a much faster time period. At the end of the day, that what you want to see is that you have long periods of uninterrupted positive stimulus to the body built in with recovery periods where you get a massive super compensation effect so that you're at a higher level of fitness. And if you constantly have to stop, you'll lose all the training gains that you would like to have anyway.
I had to stop playing volleyball, but I didn't have to stop lifting.
So, and you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
You're doing a fantastic job with that, but you're still on the rehab standard. The most important thing is that your wrist gets healthier. And what's funny about this is I know that there's people sitting at home who are not admitting to themselves for the very same reason, for whatever it is. You have an injury that's not managed. You're overloading the tissue capacity constantly. It's a mistake.
Don't take time off, maybe from whatever activity is hurting you. You can still be very active, though.
100%. I would also agree that rehab standard does not mean that you quit doing the activity that hurts you. It means you do it in such a way that's incredibly well managed, where at the end of the day, when you get done with the activity, your tissue capacity increases.
And it's hard to keep motivation up, too. Like, I feel like I've started new things. Like, I've been really working hard on my vertical leap, but then also some of this endurance stuff where I ran again yesterday after heavy squatting and thought I was going to fall off the treadmill. So I had to stop before I necessarily wanted to. I was also on a 10-minute mile pace, which probably was an issue because I was going way too fast.
No calf explosion?
My calves hurt. My calves hurt every time I run, and I don't know that that's ever going to go away, but they're massive. So
they are massive.
How do you know when you're ready to move to the next standard? Because I'm ready.
Well,
I'm not.
The biggest...
I'll give in. I'm on the rehab standard. There, I said it.
There are very specific tools that are unique to the rehab standard that I want to hit each one of them. First one that starts to tell you how to progress through it is the key sign feedback loop. I'm not sure why I'm pointing at you right now. Do you know what those are?
Well, my key sign for my wrist. I know what it used to be. I don't want to do it because it hurts and I'm afraid of my body.
We don't want you to get afraid of your body. That's also important.
I don't actually think it hurts right now, but
here, let me see it.
All right.
Does it hurt to extend it?
This is my key sign.
And does it hurt at all?
Surprisingly, no. I didn't go that hard. I could probably go harder and make it hurt, but if it hurts, don't do it.
You know,
a certain
dude, you are killing me today.
So you're killing. There's certain times where it's okay for it to hurt a little bit, but
Alex likes pain. You don't have to enjoy pain when you do this. A key sign, just to beat it to death, is a tool that you can use when you start to lose the feedback loop, which is very common during this phase where you're actually starting to increase your tissue capacity. You're not going to get clear signals anymore. So right now, you had an assumption that it would be painful extension. So we now know that he's not going to get an immediate sign now when he goes into extension. It may take 50 reps of repeat extension before he gets pain. That's him actually building tissue capacity. The biggest mistake here would be if he went and tried to block a volleyball, rapidly went into overloaded extension, and he hurt again.
But that's why we would just throw a lot of tape on it.
That's actually... That's a good point. That's a good point. So you have a key sign. That second one that he's talking about, we call it artificial stabilization. If you had to play a game tomorrow, we would do that. We would 100% do that. Do you have a game tomorrow?
I wish. I could have played yesterday. I could have played like 3 times this week, and I resisted because it was feeling good enough to where I probably could have gone.
100%. If he's going to go playing a game, we are going to dramatically reinforce wrist extension. That's the second tool that you can use. So you have your key sign, your feedback loop, monitoring for it because you're no longer going to be hurting constantly. And after you do an exercise, you can retest a key sign. So say you have TFL pain and it hurt every time that you did a squat. Well, we could do stuff to make it so the squat becomes pain-free. And then the key sign, which for you was resisted hip flexion. by monitoring that throughout the workout, we were able to get it within 2 weeks to the point where it wasn't hurting him with physical activity anymore. If you didn't have your wrist injury going on, you would be moving into the exercise standard.
I would have already been in the. Okay.
You would have already been in there, right? And that's how quickly you can move outside of it. With complicated recurrent injuries where there's a high risk for it coming back, maybe you're really afraid of it and it really hurts bad, and when it happens, you lose 6 months. We may try to have much longer durable gains before we move you into the exercise standard. And so we think of it in 3 ways when you're starting to progress through it, which I'll get to in a second. But the number one thing is that you own a key sign. Number two thing is that if you need support to basically reinforce your tissue capacity, you can do what Alex did, which is you tape the wrist so it couldn't go into extension. In gymnastics, we get these, they're called tiger paws. You ever heard of that?
You just wanted to say tiger balm.
Tiger paws. I almost said tiger balm, which would be a separate episode.
Yeah.
Tiger paws, they reduced motion at the wrist for some of these for gymnastics, and that's like a really useful tool. There's all sorts of tools that people will think are bad for your body, like a lumbar brace. They think it'll take away your muscle strength. In this phase, it's extremely useful because it's actually going to make it so you quit hurting yourself with basic activities.
My 5-year-old's in gymnastics, and the things that these humans can do is just
kind of
ridiculous. There were people just flipping everywhere. It's beyond me. So what were the 3 things that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, so the other one would be your home plan, things that make it actually feel better, training aids. Big thing that we use that I find to be really helpful is to have every exercise that you do have a regression if that exercise hurts, have a lateralization, which is basically hitting at the same level, or a progression if it's feeling really good. The nice part about when at the rehab standard is you want to progress when your body's ready to progress. You want to do harder things when your body's ready for it, but you don't want to overload it. And you always want to have in the back of your head, your main problem is your tissue capacity is getting overloaded by your exercise capacity.
Yeah.
So just at a basic level, say squatting, once again, squatting was what hurt his hip, and say we had programmed a barbell back squat. A regression could be a change in load. We could just reduce how much weight he's doing. Let's say we don't want to do that. Another thing we could do would be have him actually still do a barbell back squat, but do a tap to the box and come back up. A lateralization could be a front squat. So sometimes these small little changes, even though they'll hit the muscles the same, will change the mechanics enough that you're not hurting the tissue anymore.
Yeah. Right. And that's what's cool about Craig's training program. In the app that he uses, there's kind of a drop-down menu. So if, you're not feeling it that day and you've got barbell back squat on there, there'll be a list of, 5 or 6 different exercises that you can use it as alternates.
Yeah.
And so it might be a goblet squat. It could be, whatever, some banded squat or whatever it may be. But it's nice to have the variability. I find myself in there more often, like trying to find something harder to do.
That would be a progression.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. So using progressions intelligently is very helpful in this phase, as long as you have the other tools. And in the back of your head, you remember, like Alex sometimes struggles to, that the main problem is that his wrist hurts him and it keeps on overloading it. Those are to me are the most useful tools in the rehab standard that you don't really look at when you're looking at exercise and the exercise standard or performance standard. You should already be past it at that point.
Past your prime. That's what we are.
You should absolutely be past your prime at that point.
What are the different ways that you can progress with exercise? So we just talked about increasing weight. You can use volume, intensity, maybe making your exercise more complex. Are there other ways that I'm not thinking?
Wow, you just hit a whole bunch of them. Those are all fantastic ways. So the most obvious one is increasing load. That could be you increase the weight that you're lifting. That could be that you add more sets or reps, right? You add volume to it. Another one would be adding an extra workout. So say you could only tolerate at the beginning of the rehab standard 2 workouts, and at the end of the week you feel good. But if you did that third, you'd feel terrible. That would be a progression, be adding a whole nother day. Movement complexity kind of hits what like I was talking about the RLPs, the regressions, lateralizations, and progressions. That's another one that's often not discussed because movement complexity is clearly a progression.
Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I did hex bar jump squats this week, which you're probably not proud of me, but I can do cleans, and cleans, at least in my lens, are a big way to increase your vertical. And so staying in my rehab standard.
Oh my
It felt
God.
really good though.
This is hilarious.
And my wrist felt amazing.
So I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. We clearly need to adjust Alex's program just a little bit
So I can feel
so you
satisfied.
can feel satisfied. It's a great point. It's actually a really good point. When you're going through this, it doesn't mean that you can't work out really hard. It just means at the end of the day, do you feel worse in the area it's actually your biggest limiter? Your biggest limiter is your wrist. And so we should look at your workouts again. We'll progress your workouts, and they may actually look like almost a normal performance workout, but you have to make sure that your wrist is.
It's a confession hour.
It is. This is crazy. I'm going to absolve you by the end of this by talking you through.
Thank you.
We're gonna take out the demons.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, that's a really good point. Is what I think you're railing against. And if I could make sure, you had a vertical increase when you were actually struggling with your wrist. So you had a performance variable.
I could only lift legs for 6 months,
and you jumped, and so you could jump out of the gym because of that, right? I'm not disagreeing that you can't have a performance variable improvement, but your biggest limiter, your biggest problem is
you're caving a little bit right now.
No, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. We can hammer it, but the way I look at it is hierarchical. And so if any of those workouts that we're trying to improve your vertical would cause your wrist to feel worse, we wouldn't do it. Yeah. But if you're having where you can do 90% of the workout and your wrist isn't getting compromised, okay, I'm totally down with it. But then after that, my idea would not be immediately to go to your nervous system training, doing things that like a French contrast. We wouldn't go that route. It would then go to, are there any foundational issues around strength, coordination, speed, and endurance? And then say those all look good. Then we look at your functional movements, say those all look good. Then we would pass you into a performance mindset.
Yeah.
Because if you don't check all those boxes, there's so many holes in the performance training that we're going to do that you won't ever be able to push yourself to get the actual benefits of performance training, sport specific training. And I would say the amount of professional athletes that I've had come in where they struggle with the rehab standard. If, for example, you can't squat without your back hurting, why would I increase the weight?
Right.
You're going to be so compromised every time that you squat that you're not even going to get the training stimulus that's going to be helpful.
And that's something we talked about earlier, is like, you have to be healthy, or at least very close to healthy, to perform at your top level anyway.
Yes.
And that's clear with my wrist, but also with just anything else. Like you said, if your back hurts when you're squatting, you're not going to be able to squat more. If your leg hurts when jumping, you're not going to be able to jump more. And that's one spot where neurally, I think I've cut back quite a bit from what I was doing even a month ago or before my TFL injury. I'm only doing plyos like once or twice a week now, and probably like a quarter of the volume that I was doing previously. Part of it is because like my TFL just still feels a little bit tight when I'm going to do some of the box jumps and things that I'm doing. I know you put broad jumps in. I just haven't done those yet because I'm just a little bit weary of how they're going to feel. So maybe we'll mess with some of those things today just to see how they're feeling.
Test them out.
But yeah, that's one spot where like, okay, I have dialed it back because of my injury.
Oh, you're caving. You're caving.
Yeah. Once again, confession hour.
I love it.
So yeah, I guess that just kind of is what it is. But then like the other four things that you were talking about, or a couple of them, like speed and agility, I feel like are two. Speed and maybe coordination, I think that's what they were, are spots where I haven't just worked on a lot. I don't know how speed plays into just like general weightlifting. I haven't done a lot of speed work recently, so maybe that's something we can try.
It's absolutely something that we can start to bring in. You can have these different core abilities, core variables that you want to be able to train. They will get hit during the course of a normal workout. Whether it's any of the 6 functional movements, there you could do things like tempo. You can also adjust things like time under tension. All of those will hit those different variables. So if we're trying to aim for strengths when we're still on the rehab standard, let's say we at the same point, we're not going to hurt anything if we start to work on sets between, rep ranges between 5 to 8. Okay, we'll totally throw that in. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that the main problem is the rehab standard, which is that your tissue capacity is not high. Let's say then we wanted to work on endurance, and we could go higher reps from 10 to 15 reps, where you're really hitting the endurance capacity of the muscle. But then we can also throw in endurance capacity training for the anaerobic system and glycolytic system, and for your aerobic system, that you can do things that aren't bothering that issue. What always takes primacy when you're in the rehab standard is that the tissue that's the biggest limiter for activity
I'm about to cry.
is the most important part. Are you about to cry?
I think so.
Oh my God. So embarrassing.
Yeah,
No.
we just play into that every episode now.
Are you about to cry?
I might. Yeah, I'm feeling emotional over my wrist and you not letting me work out hard.
But you'll feel better if I do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome.
And then, so like, I was going to ask about speed. Would speed, I think of it in just in terms of sprinting. I have not been sprinting or anything like that, but would that play into just like moving the bar faster?
It absolutely can.
Okay.
Speed is an interesting construct, but I often think of it in ways that can you control the amount of force that you're producing, and then how you produce that force. There's tempo work that you can do. So tempo is something that you'll use with lifts, where it's typically 4 numbers. So the going down is the first number, the bottom is the second number, going back up is the third, and then before you start the next exercise is the fourth. And so you'll put times on it. So we'll say, if we're talking about the squat again, you descend for 3 seconds, and at the bottom you hold it for 2 seconds, and then you explode up as fast as you can through the concentric phase on the way up, and then you immediately go back into it. So that would be a 3-1-X-0.
Okay.
And those things can be ways that you actually work on speed while you're hitting strength, but all of those things, because they interact with each other, you can't pull them completely apart. Obviously, you'll be hitting aspects of it. And one concept of like block training, for example, is that you'll hit some of these like strength workouts for one block, and then while you've got this increase in strength, the next block maybe will have more of a focus on endurance. And then we come back to strength, because you don't have a complete loss of strength when you're not working on it specifically. Say you have a 5% reduction while you maximize endurance, and then in the third training block, 5 weeks in, so this would be 10 weeks in, now we're going to focus on strength endurance. So you can put it all together. So it's really fun when you start to think of programming, especially in the performance phase. But you can think about programming throughout this whole thing. But if you feel really terrible with a single exercise workout, if you don't clear that, you're always going to be limited when you get to the exercise maintenance standard. You're always going to be limited when you get to the performance standard, because you just won't be able to tolerate the stimulus that you're trying to put onto the body, which then you're going to have the super compensation effect from.
I did a couple of weird things like that this week. Eccentric leg extensions,
okay,
where I just lowered it as slowly as I could. So like 6-second tempo or something like that. Those felt really good. I've been doing a lot of leg extension isometrics. So like I'll do a single leg isometric, and then after that, just do some slow eccentrics. I also did the overreaching isometric squat that we talked about maybe 2 episodes ago.
Okay.
So I basically put the squat bar underneath the hooks so that it couldn't be moved up at all. And I just pushed as hard as I could. My knee was hurting before that, like a weird little patella thing. I didn't tell you about that either. But it felt great afterwards, after doing both of those things. So I was able to kind of self-manage through some isometrics a little bit. It was a very small amount of pain, but I just felt it while squatting. And I was like, let me try these isometrics. It looks like I can do them right here. And
I am very excited we had this talk. So if you're working with somebody like a coach, or like with me, and this starts to happen, I am obviously missing the boat with his program right now, because he's not getting the other aspects of it that make you feel like you're still being fit, which is actually incredibly important in the rehab standard, that you don't feel like you're jonesing to do more. So I've obviously made a mistake. So things I'm missing with his program, it sounds like his workouts that I've given him are dramatically too easy.
I did put the feedback on. He's got a little app that says,
that's true,
rate your workout. And I'm like, okay, 1 out of 10.
I clearly wait where I'm talking with Alex before we update his stuff. We have to increase the intensity of it. We have to increase some of the, sounds like he also seems like he craves variety. All of those
Very true.
things do not matter to me if every exercise he was doing is hurting him. But in this situation, we absolutely can expand dramatically what he's doing. It's really fun to program, but it's always a mistake if you increase variety in the rehab standard without the tissue feeling dramatically better. So we're going to hit a lot of it.
And like I think I told you this before, but in my workouts, my wrist ends up feeling really good for some reason.
Nice.
Like, no pain at all. I feel like I'm getting more extension than normal, and like, I'm doing some bench exercises. I'm putting more compression on it, which a month ago didn't feel great, and it seems to be causing no issues right now. So I think that's why I'm kind of jonesing for the progression like we're talking about.
Which is totally where you want to get the person. And so in my brain, this is how I look through it. You want to get to where specific exercises start to feel really good. So always look at tissue capacity versus exercise capacity. So I'm applying some exercise. I want to see that the tissue feels very good when you're doing it. So that's always the first thing. Does it hurt while you're doing the activity? If it does, it's not the right exercise, you regress it. That's the first progression that you want to get through when you're in the rehab standard, is that the exercises you're doing are really well tolerated. And then they have no impact on the key sign. So let's say you already are pain-free, and then after you do the exercise, we'll go back to the low back. The easiest key sign for your low back is trying to touch your toes, extend your back, go side to side. After you do the lift, imagine now that's painful. That the exercise, that wasn't a good response.
Right.
And so we can do your home plan, your PT additions, the lumbar traction to make it feel better. That's the first step. You got to get to where every exercise that you do is really well tolerated. Then after you get through that, it's get to a single workout being really well tolerated, where you don't have a symptom 12 hours later when you wake up. You don't feel that you got hit by a Mack truck, right? After you get to that, it's now linking workouts in a week. So now you tolerate 2 workouts with no symptom increase. Now it's 3 workouts with no symptom increase. Once we get through that, then it's starting to scheme the programming where you're starting to increase load, volume, intensity, everything is starting to go up, and it's still really well tolerated. Your key signs are still saying negative. Finally, we get to where you push it. You push to the level where your exercise capacity is, and you don't have a bad response. Now you're through the rehab standard, because you're not getting blown up by what would be considered a normal program.
You brought up a good point there in terms of kind of like, I go back to the home plan and continuing to do whatever helped your original injury far beyond when your injury just feels better. Even when my wrist is not hurting, I'll continue to traction it. My TFL really has not been bothering me, but I continue to do glute activation every week, every workout, just to make sure that I'm staying on top of it and I don't have a regression. And I think those just make it better for, your overall health or performance, as long as you're staying on top of, because I think you mentioned it in one of the earlier injury episodes, it's basically injured for life. Your tissue capacity probably will end up getting better, but your risk of injury is going up. And that's just kind of how I feel with my TFL right now. And that's why I've been very conservative with it, because that one was surprisingly a big limiter. Once again, tiny little muscle in your hip, stopping me from jumping, or at least making it more difficult for me to jump.
I look at it as tissue capacity, and there's almost a balance. So you have things that will trigger it and reduce tissue capacity, make it feel worse. And then you have things that are therapeutic and make tissue capacity go up. It's about making the things that make the tissue capacity go up and continuing to do them even when it seems to be healed.
Right.
There's a period of time where it's still vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Home plan, training aids, appropriate tissue loading, those all cause an improvement in your tissue capacity. That doesn't go away once the obvious feedback loop is gone. You still should be doing those. But then once you get through all of those things, that you're ready to move on to the exercise standard, which that's what we're really going to hit and hammer in the next episode.
Nice. How can working with a PT, physical therapist, or a strength coach kind of enhance, exercise progression?
I look at both of those individuals as facilitators. The physical therapist is really going to help you understand and give you feedback loops for your tissue health. You're going to be able to learn, okay, we just did an episode on the comment section, and somebody has a forearm injury in their question. Well, that's not specific. I don't actually know exactly what tissue's involved, And there's very different response if it's the elbow joint, a humeral ulnar joint, versus if it's a radial ulnar joint, versus if it's the radial humeral joint, distal, proximal. Those all matter because the response will be different on what you do. Then if there's also muscular tissue. All I'm saying is it's complicated. And if you don't actually know the tissue injury, you don't know how to do the key sign. You don't actually have clarity on what you can do to make it feel better when it's hurting. So that's where the physical therapist is the most useful, or at least they should be the most useful. I won't lie, there's a whole bunch of terrible physical therapists out there who
Just call them out.
well, I'm serious. They're absolutely terrible, and they will just load you up with exercises that have no impact on your tissue health, and they also don't give you the tools to make it so that you can monitor on your own. I think it's frankly embarrassing, and I deal with those types of horrible professionals on a semi-regular basis, and I think that our profession can do better.
He's really good at what he does. I'll just say that.
Coaching is a little bit different. Coaching, you should have a bias towards action, a bias towards progression. If there were the coach sitting here, they may have not hammered the rehab standard to the same level that I just did, because a coach wants to also move past, right? The coach should want to take you to the place that you want to go to. They should be a facilitator for action and performance. And that's where they're going to go. And it's one of the interesting pieces with our team is that there's always a little bit of a dynamic, because you can't be really good, in my opinion, as a rehab professional without seeing the risk and the horrible stuff all the time.
Right.
And you can't be a coach without a bias towards pushing somebody's limits, because we by nature want to be lazy, sit there, not do anything. We get unmotivated. The coach is your motivator. And that, honestly, I find those two work so beautifully together, because they both have biases in opposite directions, and they both have a focus on different standards. It's also one of the reasons why we really try to never have a physical therapist in the gym. Coaches are always there. Yeah. We never have a PT in the gym, because truthfully, I don't think you can see the things that we see and not be nervous the whole time when somebody's pushing their edge.
I think it's cool just working with Craig, because he has that kind of bilateral lens on strength and conditioning with physical therapy. And I mean, there's so many small exercises out there that you wouldn't think of that. I mean, for my wrist specifically, I'm doing like a modified skull crusher with one hand to kind of work on the whole right arm strength, but then specifically wrist extension. That's something that I would have never gotten probably anywhere else. Definitely not from an S&C coach. Small things like step downs, for your knee health, different exercises I've done for my shoulder. There's so many kind of small exercises out there that, you probably don't see a whole bunch of people recommending. Maybe there's other PTs out there that would try these kind of things that I find weird. But they're just so helpful. And if you do them consistently over time, like you said, it builds that tissue back up to where it's at a normal capacity or past its normal capacity. And you just get stronger and healthier through all of those things.
Great point.
Yeah.
I guess one of the pieces that I find really interesting, maybe you could thread the needle if you're a PT who also works as a coach, a strength coach. I have never seen it work that well. But if you have somebody who's doing that for you, I don't mean to say that you can't work with those individuals. We find it to be very helpful to be really clear on what the person's main problem is. And then that person is the quarterback with the client. The rehab standard is the sticky point. It's the one where either person could be in charge, right? You could have a physical therapist who's sitting on top of that. That's really an early stage rehab standard. The person who struggles to get a single workout in without getting completely blown up. But when you're at end stage, you're definitely a coach is one pushing you, because you should be flirting with the edge of moving into the exercise maintenance standard, where you're going to start working on the other attributes, and your tissue health is not the primary thing that we're looking at.
And that makes a lot of sense, because that's what you see at the professional collegiate level. You see PTs and S&C coaches completely separate. They work together. They talk, they meet, they go over, what's going to help the person in the gym and what's going to help them on the rehab side of things. So yeah, that's a good point.
Physical therapy exercises they're not sufficient for a full workout.
Right.
The way that we use it, the way that we were taught in school, the way I see it often, some individuals will turn those into a workout plan by themselves. I would suggest not doing that, because the physical therapy exercises are really built to maybe they do address contributing factors, how you got the injury. But at the end of the day, you want a full-blown workout plan when you get to the exercise standard that hits those other variables, makes you more functional in life, and is pushing some of those edges. You may never enter into a performance training program where you're trying to get something specific, but it does matter. It does matter that you are doing some level of progression in the next level, which we'll hit obviously in the next episode.
Nice. All right. Closing thoughts. I'm in the rehab standard.
I won. I hope everybody heard that. That was me winning. I'm very happy with this episode now.
All righty. He looks like Luka Doncic.
Oh, oh, that's so brutal. All right. Do the subscribe thing.
Like, comment, subscribe, rate it high. Drop a comment below. Go to pastureprime.com. Any other requests?
No. Luka. Playing for the Lakers.
Yeah, playing for the Lakers. That's crazy.
Thanks, everybody.
All righty. PYP.
PYP, baby. You threw a Luka comment in there.